So now the panel is going to talk about the presidency with respect to this concept or this idea of the symbol, the leader, and the idea and practice of governing. I'm hoping that this is an introduction, and that the rest of you will chime in and contribute to this by thinking out loud about what you think about these matters. You can bring in Marx as it's relevant, Revolutionary Leadership's Important Question, or any other reading that you're doing that you think might be relevant, or life experience that you think might be relevant. So immediately on my left is Isabel Cruz, who is a very talented, as you know, Bard High School Early College student, and would like for her public to know that she's an avid Bardarian. That is to say, she's on the Frisbee team. Yeah. Next is Liam Duffy. Liam wants us to know that he likes to run. Next to Liam is Isabel Gadd. And she'd like us to know that she likes art, film, and studying Chinese. Afterwards, Juan Soto, who studied Latin since 6th grade. And finally, we have Dr. Michael Lerner, principal of Bard High School Early College in Manhattan, a historian, written a fantastic book on prohibition, and who's going to be the discussant for this panel.
Hello, everyone. How are we all doing this morning? Good? Awesome. So, I know we all had the privilege of going up to Bard just a few weeks ago to witness this conference and to be a part of this conference about does the president matter? And I think that probably a lot of us think that that's kind of a silly question because, of course, the president matters. He's the president. But then we have to start to think about, well, what is the president? What does the president mean? Who is the president as a leader, a governor, and a symbol? So when we were posed the question of what does the president's symbolism mean? Is he a symbol? Who believes in this symbol? I started to think about the president as an idea, as a speaker for a camp or a set of ideas. And so I think that a lot of us will come to the consensus, or maybe those of you who disagree with me will call me out on this, but that the president is supposed to be a symbol for the American voice. For the 4 years that he's in office, or he or she hopefully soon, is in office, he speaks for the American people, voices our concerns in the world and in the domestic sphere. So he tries to represent our concerns, represent what we want, and represent how our country should get to prosperity, whether that be economic or otherwise. And so I think that we realize that this is a country of over 300 million people, all of whom speak 300 different languages, practice 300 different religions. And so we're a lot of voices to be spoken for in one person, and as of now, one man. And so I think that he faces the challenge of being the symbol, that it might be considered to be a challenge to be the voice of the American people when the American people is such a large and ranging idea. But I think that in being this symbol of our ideas as a country, it brings us to unite in a way that we do in no other way. We saw that around 70 million people watched the first presidential debate, and around 60 million people watched the vice presidential debate. They haven't come up with the numbers for last night, but I'm sure a lot of us were watching. So we want to see their ideas. The American people wants to see the ideas of the president, wants to see who they can elect to represent them and to speak for them. But we know that not everyone's going to win. We saw last night that Romney and Obama were speaking for very different groups of people, and only one of them can get into office. So he's going to lead one of them, one aspect of the country, the whole country, through the ideas of one aspect. But I think that that's important in that if we were all to have one voice, I think we would be a very different country, and we would not be the America that we know and we live in. And I think that in supposedly speaking for the country when he cannot, he leads us to reflect on our own views and our own vision for the country, in that we want ourselves to be spoken for. We want our vision of the country to come into fruition. We want to see the America that we think we can prosper best in, and that our families will be the safest in. And so in the president's ideas, thinking of the president as a set of ideas, a set of actions, we are forced to reflect on what we want, especially in election time, and who will speak for us. And I think that if he is speaking for us, he motivates us to support him and to support our ideas and engage in our communities, to support this ideology, to support the positions he takes and the actions he takes. But if we don't support him, if you're among the people who think that, well, for right now, thinks that the Affordable Care Act is bad, or doesn't like contraception, or doesn't like gay marriage, or any of the things that the president stands for, you're also motivated to act in your communities in a very similar way to the people who support him. And I think that even though we have differing ideas, and even though we are a very diverse country, we come together through discourse, through duking out our ideas, through fighting to get our voices heard. And I think that the president leads in a very important way. He leads us to think about what we want and try to get our voices heard in such a large country of people. And yeah, so I think that, but I do think that he leads, he doesn't govern. I think that in leading us to reflect on our ideas, to engage in our communities, to engage in the election process, whether that be by voting or by phone banking, as many of us do in our own school, I think that in getting us to engage, he helps us be a part of the governing by talking to our elected officials, by engaging the legislative process, but that he himself does not govern the country. He leads the country. He's a symbol of the ideas, and he's kind of the symbolic figure for the government, but he himself does not govern. He himself should not, and hopefully does not, make the things that make the legislation, make the laws that govern our country. So I think that he, as a symbol and as a very important figure in our country, leads us to reflect on ourselves and unite in discussion and unite in caring about our country and caring about our families and caring about specific issues, even if we care in different ways. But he does not govern, and he should not govern. Thank you.
Hi everyone, how are you guys doing today? Great. So, can you all hear me? My view on this issue is a little bit different than Isabel's. I agree with her that the president leads as a symbol, but I also think that he governs as an executive. And furthermore, I think that his symbolic strength is crucial to his success in governing. So, first and foremost, symbolism is a key part of the president gaining power. During the campaign, a candidate's success in symbolizing a strong future for the country or symbolizing different voters' ideals of the presidency can play a huge role in whether that candidate is actually elected to the office that he's running for. An example is the first presidential debate. I don't know if all of you watched it, but what seemed like really affected the view of who won that debate and therefore who was more trusted in leading the country in the future was not the substance of what each candidate was saying, but rather it was more the tone and appearance of each candidate. And so I think that shows that the symbolic or presentational aspects of the president have a large role in whether they're successful in governing because they have a large role in whether people have confidence in their ability to lead. Once power is gained through election, I think symbolism also influences governance most prominently in foreign policy. Less than a year after Obama was elected, a majority of polled citizens worldwide expressed a positive view of the United States for the first time since the Iraq War began in 2002. And what I think this suggests is that just the symbolism of a change in the presidency can have a dramatic impact on the international relation of the United States and on the future diplomatic negotiations that the president actually engages in later on. Additionally, speeches like the one Obama made in Cairo at the beginning of his presidency, which expressed a desire for mutual respect and cooperation with the Arab world, I think have an incredible impact on actual diplomatic relations that happen later on, and especially the diplomacy and policies of the Obama administration during the Arab Spring. So in addition to foreign policy, I think that the president's symbolic aspects of the office of the presidency are very important at home. Just a few specific functions of the executive that I think can be interpreted as having symbolic significance that affect their effectiveness in governing are cabinet appointments. Cabinet appointments often, if a president appoints a credible official to a cabinet position, they seem to automatically gain credibility in the issues overseen by that cabinet position. And whether this is symbolic at the outset, but later on it can lead to greater political leverage in talking to Congress, talking to legislatures throughout the nation, or talking to international governing bodies about certain issues, and can therefore increase the effectiveness of the president's governance on certain issues. The veto power is another executive function that I would argue has a largely symbolic significance as well as a practical one. While the veto is a actual executive function, threat of a veto without the actual use of a veto can be symbolic of a president's authority and their ability to impose certain demands on Congress. But this symbolic authority can be translated into actual leverage in legislative discussions with Congress. Finally, more broadly, rather than the specific functions of the executive office, I think that the symbolism of a president's election itself can carry huge significance for how effective they can govern, at least in the first couple of years of their term. Obama's election and his view nationally and internationally as a transformative candidate, I think, contributed largely to his political capital, which he was able to use, I think, in the first 2 years of his presidency, most notably to pass the Affordable Care Act. So, unlike Isabel, I believe that while the president also leads as a symbol, he governs as an executive, and that the symbolic aspects of his presidency complement the practical, everyday executive functions of that office.
I'm going to be speaking from a slightly more historical standpoint, and I actually just added something because talking about when Isabel was talking about the debate, it reminded me of something, and so I added something on just now, which I'll talk about at the end. It's slightly unrelated, but I think it's very important for you guys to think about. So I'll just start from the beginning. While the president may lead or govern behind closed doors, his power remains based in his public image and its symbolism. Some of the most well-known and revered presidents in our nation's history are known for their outer image, their pop culture status, their personalities, or one event that ended up defining them no matter what else they achieved or failed. In the eyes of the American people, presidents are really only as much as their image. Now, it's important to remember that while I discuss this, that while we in this room are intellectuals living in one of the intellectual capitals of the nation, that makes it easy for us to view our past leaders in terms of policy, accomplishments, failures, and mistakes, etc. But despite our mindset, a large portion of the American people don't really think of these things when considering the president. With that said, I'm going to continue. John F. Kennedy is a perfect example. He was only our president for a little under one term, but he is one of the most well-known and popular presidents in our history. The appeal is clear. He was young, he was handsome, he was incredibly present in the popular media. He was Catholic. He was the first president to be Catholic, and that was a major attraction for many Americans. Marilyn Monroe famously sang at his birthday party, and they allegedly had an affair. His family and his administration were dubbed Camelot, pointing out the idealistic, beautiful, almost mythical being that it all was. His unfortunate and untimely assassination really only added to the myth. This image of JFK, this is the image of JFK that people think of, not the image of him during the Cuban Missile Crisis or his involvement in the Civil Rights Movement. Yes, he was incredibly politically important, but this is overlooked by much of the American people. They found something in him to love and to connect to personally and clung to that, creating a cult-like figure in him, loving him unconditionally, hanging on to his memory no matter what. A common question asked is, where were you when JFK was assassinated? When many Americans think of Bill Clinton, they don't immediately think of his tax reform or his implementation of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. They don't think of his attempted universal health care or even his withdrawal of troops from Somalia, leaving it in anarchy. What do they think of? Monica Lewinsky. One could say this is obvious. Of course, when there's a sex scandal attached to a person, that becomes their defining trait. But that's exactly my point. I think this says something about the American people, that we are more concerned with something like that rather than political policy that affects us, because Americans react more quickly to something socially controversial than to something political. I could go on. President Obama became a symbol for the revitalization of youth culture in our society, as well as gaining great attention for becoming the first African-American president. A very significant fact, but not a reflection of his policy. More people know the name Richard Nixon than the name of our 21st president, Chester A. Arthur. Nixon's administration was the major proponent in the Watergate scandal, leading to Nixon's resignation to avoid impeachment. But his policies involving China and his efforts in opening up relations between the two nations received less attention from the general public. President Arthur not only completely rebooted and revitalized the U.S. Navy, making it a major power again, but also was a serious advocate for civil rights in the South after the end of Reconstruction and the regaining of power by Southern whites. But people remember him much less because he didn't have glamour or scandal or a flamboyant personality or anything like that to gain the status Nixon had. People are far more familiar with the wrongdoings of Nixon than with the successes of Arthur, because Watergate helped define Nixon's image as a crook, and that is by far more what the American people are interested in. Presidents most present in American popular culture are the most famous of our presidents because Americans have a greater interest in popular culture than in politics. In fact, presidents make great use of pop culture to gain support and to push their own agendas. Many presidents and presidential nominees have made appearances on popular television shows like Saturday Night Live, appealing to the American people through entertainment, hopefully winning the favor of the viewers by taking advantage of what the American people choose to pay attention to. While campaigning for the presidency in 1992, Bill Clinton played the saxophone on late-night television on the Arsenio Hall show, which significantly boosted his ratings among young voters. So he knew how to take advantage of our weak spot for comedy and entertainment. So I suppose the president really only matters if his image is important enough for the people, as this seems to be what the people care about. And this is slightly unrelated, but I really like to bring it up because I think it's very important. We often forget about third-party candidates. I was watching Democracy Now! Last night, and it was reported that there are contracts each candidate must sign before the debates that explicitly forbids them from entering the debates with any other candidates outside of the Republican and Democratic parties, as well as tightly controlling the questions asked in town hall debates, taking away any spontaneity. The candidates are given the people's questions ahead of time so that the answer is very groomed to appeal to the people. Image, not substance. Last night, Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, was arrested for trying to enter the debate. She's a major candidate. I mean, she's not obviously in the two major parties, but she has a significant enough percentage of the people's support that she should be allowed to debate as well. And my question for you, just to think about, is why should someone in a third or fourth major party, like the Independent Party or the Green Party, or not the Independent Party, but an independent candidate or the Green Party, why should they not be allowed to enter the debates? It's just something to think about. So, in conclusion, certain presidents lead, others govern, others really only are a symbol in the eyes of the people and in reality. But in the end, no matter how effective or ineffective a president's policy is, a president's public image takes precedent over all, creating a mythical figure the American people can cling to and reminisce about once his time has passed. Thank you.
Hi. In thinking about the question, does the president matter, I've chosen to respond to President Botstein's talk at the Arendt conference. Botstein argued that, yes, the president matters. Specifically, he can matter as a symbol. Botstein understood President Obama's election as a symbol of the nation partially putting aside its racism. For Botstein, simply by dint of being elected, Obama matters. And I'd like to think about the president mattering as a symbol in terms of the question that was the title of one of the panels at the conference, should the president lead or govern? I wonder whether the president can lead or govern as a symbol. At the end of that panel, a member of the audience asked how the two narratives that emerged during the day could be tied together. Professor Kevin Gutzman, the one who hated on Michelle Obama, described the first narrative when he spoke of the gross expansion of executive power in recent history. The audience member named the second, which is that the question, does the president matter, is intuitively reasonable. Her question was, how can both of these be true? I think that Kevin Gutzman's answer is pertinent. He said that our hopes are not fulfilled because during the presidential campaign, we are led to expect excitement, miracles, and a reason for being from the president. His point being that the president simply cannot meet our expectations, especially considering that the executive branch is not meant to have any legislative power. During the campaign, the president sets himself up as a symbol of unachievable progress, and in Obama's case, he set himself up as a symbol of hope with a capital H. This suggests that the president's symbolic role is very limiting. It is inescapable because he is defined by what he is a symbol of and not by what he is probably capable of achieving. Even now, Romney argues that Obama essentially failed, that he promised, for example, to have the deficit, and he could not deliver. What good Obama has achieved, Obamacare, for example, is viewed in the context of what he has failed to achieve. The symbolic role of the presidency limits the president's ability to lead in another way too, although this has less to do with his ability to lead specific courses of action. The president symbolizes promises as well as a platform and a party. The president, the symbol at the center of our political discourse, is symbolic of one viewpoint. The president then symbolizes a kind of imposed unity. One party's platform is the focus of our political thought for 4 years. This does not symbolize leadership toward any sort of widespread political participation. Rather, the president symbolizes a static state of affairs, one in which we don't even have to be politically knowledgeable to know the political agenda of our nation for 4 years. Simultaneously, I think the office of the presidency symbolizes our two-party system. The centrality of the president to our media's portrayal of politics emphasizes the split in our politics between Democrats and Republicans. Since so much media attention is concerned with the politics of just one person, any opposition is conglomerated and concentrated in one opposition party. While this may allow the president to lead his own faction effectively, he does not serve well as a symbol of political participation and discourse. He becomes a symbol of one-sidedness, not a symbol for the kind of political system that could, for example, accommodate a pirate party. All in all, I think the office of president is not well suited to promoting democracy and a diversity of points of view. It is well suited to maintaining the outcome of an election, not to leading. The nature of the symbol of the presidency is passive, not active, and this makes the president poorly suited to lead.
When Barack Obama was elected, and he promised change, and he promised hope with a capital H, he also promised that he was going to change the nature of politics in Washington, and that he promised, as other people have promised in the past, to be a president for the entire country, a president for all people, one who would put aside the bipartisan rancor. Do you think, panel, do you think that he has accomplished that? And if he hasn't, and I think we kind of know what the answer is already, why has he not been able to do that? And is that something that's realistically within the reach?
So I think that part of where I guess he's failed but also succeeded doing, he said he's become like too moderate, kind of, like he's too scared of disappointing either side, that everything has become stagnant. And so like he's like doesn't want to hurt anyone's feelings, kind of, so it just becomes kind of like almost regressive because he's not getting anything done in that sense. And so that, I think, is kind of what I think is the answer.
I mean, at this point, anyone from the floor is welcome to join in and either ask questions or comment, but I'd still like to keep this question on the table. Why has Obama not been able to heal the partisan differences that we still see? Stand up.
I mean, I think going with what Isabel was talking about in the beginning, what Isabel was talking about in the beginning about the fact that the president should be a voice for many different ideas. I don't think it's necessarily a problem that there should be different ideas in the government, that we shouldn't have an agreement on everything, because then it couldn't be a representation of our country. The problem is that there's the idea that there are only two opinions. The problem is the two parties, not the fact that there is any variance in ideas.
Which is a very good point. I mean, one of the other things I wanted to ask you, and I'll ask to the audience as well, is it possible in a bipartisan system, which is by its very nature always divided between two parties, to have a symbolic leader who can lead both sides of that division? Or is that just a pipe dream that we're constantly going to flip back and forth between someone who's the symbolic leader of half of America and the other half of America is resentful that they don't have their symbolic leader in power?
Not a pipe dream.
I think that it's pretty much impossible to have a president who will be able to represent both Republicans and Democrats. It's impossible for you to be able to stand for everything that everyone is saying. The reason why there's a separation is because they don't have the same ideas and they stand for different things. So I think it's pretty impossible to have a president who's going to be able to satisfy the Republicans and the Democrats and have the whole world happy. Like, it's not possible.
I'm not really sure how to phrase this question just yet. It's kind of still brewing in my head, but a couple of you mentioned, well, actually Liam specifically mentioned that the candidates can't deviate from their ideological centers. I know you're talking also about the social sphere, right, and our sociology and our mentality, but do you think that, and I'll bring up Marx here because you also kind of alluded to him in terms of how economy also drives how we interact socially. But do you think that we actually have a very weak state of ideology in this country, which is the reason for our problems and the fact that we think monetary power is most effective and that we're fixed in the system and that we can't deviate from it, we can't change it because that is the way it is. Just like Marx says, our mentality is fixed to the economic sphere, and so we think this is really the only way, this is the only workable solution. But do you think that we have to strengthen our ideology and actually be slightly idealistic and not think that this is the only practical solution in order to kind of promote democracy, as you say, and to promote the values that we were founded on?
Currently, ideology really cloaks, at least in my view, Republicans really cloaks the real purpose of some policies. And this applies to Congress as well as the president. And when you have justifications, ideological justifications for certain positions in terms of the role of government, the moral right of government, or the economic, the constitutionality of certain economic rules, I think that all of those justifications are put forward for policies that are really being advocated for largely because of lobbyists or because of private interests. And so I guess in a Marxist view, that would be the bourgeoisie influencing the political process. But I don't think it has to do with necessarily the strength of the ideology. It has to do with the role of the ideology. Because I think if you're using ideology as a way to cloak the real intention of your policy, then it doesn't, changing your ideological position or changing your ideological strength is not going to change the actual impact of the policies or whether they are strongly supported by members of Congress or not.